Hey guys, no intro today. This is going to be a special video. Well, I don't know if special is really the right word, but this is going to be a different one. And it's something that I've been wanting to talk about for the last couple months since I saw the Michael Jackson movie. To get right to the point, I knew inevitably this discussion was going to pop up. We all know about the allegations where he was accused of sexually abusing young boys. There are some people, even to this day, after not being convicted in a court, who still believe that he actually did those things. This is something that I think has been honestly building up inside of me for about a decade, maybe even longer. This whole idea of canceling somebody because of something that they said or did. I've heard at least one or two other people talk about this on here. Not many people do, because I know that this is a really touchy subject, and I wouldn't disagree with that. This is hard, because like with anything, with human beings being involved, there's inevitably going to be some messiness thrown into the mix. Human nature is capable of doing really great things, but also capable of doing horrible things. But as far as canceling people who are famous because of something that they said or did, or what they believe in, or who they support, I admittedly do feel the need to put my 2 cents in. Because I think, if I'm being honest with you, even though I have a certain worldview that I have made it clear in more ways than one in my previous videos, this whole idea of canceling somebody, I think, can go a little too far in certain places with certain people. And I think we have to be a little careful and cognizant of who is involved here. But I also realize that everybody's going to have their own takeaway, and where they're willing to draw the line in the sand, everybody's going to have their own red line. And I guess that's pretty much the answer of, what do we do about it? Before we get to that, starting off with Michael Jackson, if you saw my review of it a couple months ago, I said that I was a casual listener of Michael Jackson. Actually, I lied, because I was afraid of what people would say. And I've gotten some pushback in the past over saying that I'm a fan of his music. He was honestly a really big inspiration for me. As far as singers that really had a big impact on me, it's John Bon Jovi, Eddie Vedder, Freddie Mercury, and Michael Jackson. As far as the ladies, it's Avril Lavigne, Britney Spears, Stevie Nicks, and Tina Turner. But Michael Jackson was someone that I was really blown away by at a young age because of how much of a musical genius he was. The movie actually really helped me get back into his music, and I think I'm more than confident to say that he is definitely one of my all-time favorite musical artists. And I'm not ashamed to say it. I know that's going to cause some people to pull back in horror or disgust because of the allegations, and I think you are perfectly justified in feeling that way. But the pushback I've gotten more or less is, well, wait a minute, how could you listen to Michael Jackson's music? The guy's a pedophile, and he's not the only one. I mean, there's plenty of other people that are famous who have said and done things that have not sit well with certain people. The list is endless, really, but I guess to name a few, we're going to be here for a while, I guess, but we'll see if we can get through this. To start it off, Kevin Spacey. We all know pretty clearly by now, this guy is just a piece of shit because of what came out about him. Even before all that stuff came out, I was never really a huge fan of the guy. Not that I disliked him as an actor. I thought he was actually quite an exceptional one from what I've seen. Now, in light of everything that's come out, I'm not really going to lose any sleep over not watching his movies as much anymore. Maybe I'll watch stuff like The Negotiator and maybe Seven once in a great while, but that's really about it. When it's pretty clear what somebody has done, that's where I tend to draw the line. But then again, I'm speaking from my own perspective, and I know what I said earlier, everybody has their own red lines in the sand. And I have my own red lines just like you do. But as far as other examples, Tobey Maguire is someone that I've gotten pushback on, not just because of his portrayal of Spider-Man versus people like Andrew Garfield or Tom Holland. Some things have come out about him where he's not exactly the easiest to talk to or to interview. He often is on the list of worst people to get an autograph from when he's out in public. Following his career ever since I saw him in the first Spider-Man movie, I could tell that he's not the kind of guy to enjoy the spotlight as much. He kind of prefers, at least this is the impression I get anyway, who prefers to have a quiet life rather than dealing with all the attention from the news media and the paparazzi and all that, as opposed to his best friend Leonardo DiCaprio, who is, for all intents and purposes, a Hollywood type of actor. And Tobey Maguire is not the typical kind of Hollywood actor. I certainly don't think that's a bad thing. But then certain things came out from this woman called Molly Bloom, who was known for Molly's Game, not just the book, but also the movie starring Jessica Chastain. Molly mentioned Tobey Maguire in her book, where he was playing this big poker game that she was a part of, like this poker princess of some kind. And he wasn't the only celebrity that was there. People like Ben Affleck were there, and I can't remember offhand who else was in there, but she had some pretty salacious details about Tobey Maguire, that he apparently was really rude to her and told her to bark like a seal, and was actually a sore loser. Once all that stuff came out in 2014, everybody was talking about it, considering how it was really hip and cool to love Andrew Garfield and kind of dismiss Tobey Maguire. There was already a lot of disdain thrown his way because of how Spider-Man 3 turned out as well, with the emo Peter scenes. That only added more fuel to the fire. And then the movie came out, Molly's Game, starring Jessica Chastain. Personally, I didn't even bother watching it because I knew exactly what was going to happen. Well, not everybody, as it turns out in hindsight, but a lot of people were going to be focusing on that one part of Tobey Maguire. Now, thankfully, Aaron Sorkin, the writer of that movie, he gave the character a different name, Player X. But apparently, one of the lines of dialogue from Jessica Chastain is that she says to him over the phone, "You green screen piece of shit." Anybody who knows the story of Molly Bloom, we can all guess who she's talking about. That was not me dismissing anybody involved in making the movie, from Chastain to Aaron Sorkin or anybody else that was in there. It's because I knew, like I said, some people were going to be focusing on Michael Cera's character, Player X, and they were wondering who that actually was. They were going to go to the book, and all that publicity or that negative press that Tobey got, in hindsight, it made him even go further under the radar from what I was able to tell. Even though he had a movie that came out around that same time in Pawn Sacrifice, it made him look pretty bad. But even then, I would not say that that was the worst thing in the world. I've heard famous people say far, far worse than that. Am I condoning what he said or did? No, absolutely not. I'm just saying that the backlash surrounding that I thought was a little blown out of proportion. Just from my estimation anyway. But then there's Christian Bale, who had a meltdown on Terminator Salvation. You might have heard a recording that was made at the time if you had seen the movie. To his credit, he actually went public with it and apologized for that. And he actually poked fun at himself when he won the Oscar for The Fighter sometime after that.
I'm not going to drop the F-bomb like she did. I've done that plenty before.
And another one that comes to mind is Dave Grohl, the lead singer of the Foo Fighters. He had an affair and had a child out of wedlock, or had a bastard child, so to speak. Dave Grohl has a reputation for being a really nice guy, so when that stuff came out, that was admittedly really hard to swallow for me, because I really like the Foo Fighters, and I saw them in concert not too long before that news came out. I saw them in Hershey, and it was an incredible show. And Dave Grohl, he, as a performer, is off the charts. He is insane, and I mean that in a good way. Little sidebar, when he first came out, he literally went, "Wow!" like he was a heavy metal Skid Row singer or something. I don't know where that came from, but I could go on about that concert, but stick to the topic at hand, Joe. And one of you guys actually sent this to me. I remember sitting there reading that going, what? No, that can't be real. Admittedly, it did tamper my view of him for a while, but I know some people personally who refuse to listen to the Foo Fighters music ever again because of that, or they've even lost respect for him, including my own mom. I'm sorry, Mom, I love you. I'm not trying to be mean, I'm just trying to make a point, that's all. And there was a couple of things I forgot to mention about Tobey Maguire. He's known for being a bit irate with the paparazzi. Most of you have seen the famous photo when he's leaning his head out the window and screaming at the photographers getting in the way of his car. I mean, if I were him, I'd probably be doing the same. And there was also one YouTuber that I used to follow. His name is Bandit Incorporated. I don't follow him anymore. But he was talking about the first Spider-Man movie, and he made this huge fuss over Tobey Maguire getting really mad at James Franco for calling him a frog face. And Bandit Incorporated just laughed at the fact that Tobey was so triggered over that. But who in their right mind would call somebody a frog face? And that's another one, James Franco. That guy, I really like him as Harry Osborn, and I've liked some other movies that he's done, but I always found him kind of obnoxious, if I'm being honest, and a bit of a slimeball and pretentious. And then when certain things came out when he was accused of sexual misconduct, I remember his response being something like, "They're not accurate." No. That implies some kind of guilt. At least from my vantage point, that implies guilt. The list goes on and on, really. I mean, Justin Bieber is one example. We can point out a laundry list of things that the guy has said or done, and I think he's just one of the most insufferable people to walk this planet. Miley Cyrus went crazy for a while with that wrecking ball face that she did. Woody Allen, who, from what I've heard, he's basically a molester. I don't know if that's true. yeah, Mel Gibson has said some of the most reprehensible things that I have ever heard. We all know, if you're old enough to remember, what he said over the phone to his now ex-wife. I'm not going to play the recording here, just look it up. I have said in the past that I actually respect the guy as a filmmaker and as an actor, and I felt that he deserved a second chance from Hollywood. There is a part of me that still does believe that and stand by what I said. However, wait a second. In the last couple of years, I've had to come to terms with what he's actually like as a person. I kind of knew in the back of my mind, but I didn't really want to face it. But I can still appreciate and respect what he was able to bring with certain movies that he did, like Braveheart. Come on, you cannot tell me that Braveheart's a bad movie because of what he said or did. The first Lethal Weapon, anyway, is amazing. I really like We Were Soldiers. Signs, I think, is incredible. He made Hacksaw Ridge about 10 years ago, which got a lot of Oscar attention at the time, long after all the controversies that came out about him. And of course, he made Passion of the Christ. Whether or not you are actually a believer in a higher power, I think a lot of people would agree that it was actually a really good movie. Johnny Depp going through his recent trial of spousal abuse from his marriage with Amber Heard, who is just literally this side and that side of crazy. And he's not exactly a saint either. Knowing some of his past history, it kind of made me understand him better as to how he ended up in that scenario. Still not entirely excusing him for his part in that situation, though. But then there's Chris Brown, who everybody and their mother knows literally beat the shit out of Rihanna. That is not a secret. Mike Tyson was convicted of, and the actors from The Hangover were willing to work with him as opposed to Mel Gibson. Whether or not you actually think that was justifiable or not, I mean, I'll leave that up to the person watching this. Being convicted of that, along with being a racist, they're kind of on the same playing field as far as just deplorable behavior, as far as I'm concerned. I can watch the first Hangover fine and let it roll off my back, but I wouldn't say that I'm a fan of Mike Tyson. But I'm also not into boxing either, so it really wasn't any skin off my back. Still, that was not good. Not good at all, what he was convicted of. One big example is Robert Downey Jr. That guy went literally through hell, but also came out of it on the other side completely fine. More than fine. It still amazes me what that guy was able to go through. He was literally strung out as a crackhead and was a washed up has-been. But then he slowly started to find his footing, with the help, which you might be surprised, of Mel Gibson. Yeah, Mel Gibson himself was able to help Robert Downey Jr. get back on the right path. And look where he's at right now. He had a great run in the MCU as Iron Man. Then he went on to win an Oscar for Oppenheimer. Now he's going to come back later this year in Doomsday as Dr. Doom. Future Joe here. I forgot to mention a couple other examples too. Jon Bon Jovi apparently had some scrutiny after some comment he made a couple years ago about 100 girls being thrown at him. And of course, knowing how the media is, they just went wild with it and made it sound like he was actually cheating on his wife, and that his wife Dorothea, who he's been married to since 1989, overlooked that for money reasons. I looked into it and turned out it was bullshit. But of course, with certain people that I know, they just threw him under the bus because of their past experiences, while, to a point I understand why, he later clarified what he said. That's the kind of cancel culture stuff that I'm talking about, and I think that's a little too extreme, but that's just me. And also, he dated Diane Lane for a little bit in the mid-1980s, which I think we can all agree was a huge inspiration for the song You Give Love a Bad Name. Why are we acting like this is all new information? And that same person that I was talking about who threw Jon Bon Jovi under the bus, she refuses to watch Will Smith's movies ever again because he slapped Chris Rock in the face at the Oscars. I think that's really extreme, but whatever. I mean, there's a lot more examples than just that. Obviously, there are a ton more, but you might be wondering, what exactly is the point that I'm trying to make here? My stance is not going to be that satisfying. I still believe in second chances. I believe that people can change for the better if they really want to. Robert Downey Jr., as I was talking about just now, he's managed to come out of it from his drug addiction days, and I applaud him greatly for that. I would not even begin to imagine what that was like for him. There's been a lot of famous people that have managed to find themselves back on the right track in more ways than one. Whether or not they have actually taken accountability for their actions, do I think that there should be some sort of owning up to what you do? Yeah, absolutely, or especially with what you say. Tobey Maguire, who, as I was talking about earlier, he never made a public apology or commented on the Molly Bloom situation with her book. Nobody really asked him about it, as far as I knew. If I had to guess, probably his manager or agent told the interviewers, if you're going to ask about that, then we don't want to do the interview, because he's not interested in that. But I also understand, as I heard somebody say in the past, that even if you do try to apologize for what you said or did, what good would it even do? People will still hate you for it anyway. That I certainly understand, and I think it's really going to come down to the situation and what the person said or did. In the case of Tobey Maguire, he was able to shake that off in the long run because he came back in No Way Home as Spider-Man, and then he made an appearance in Babylon the following year. There are rumors that he's going to show up as his version of Spider-Man again in Doomsday or Secret Wars. Whether or not that's true, that's a different discussion, but I think it goes to show you that even with all the stuff that came out about him and Molly Bloom, Hollywood was willing to let that go after a while. Even if he's also very careful with what projects he chooses, people are still willing to work with him. And it is worth the hassle and negative backlash that would come with the stuff that came out about him from Molly Bloom. But even then, I don't even think it's that bad. I mean, was it a good thing to say to Molly Bloom if that's what he said? No, of course not. There are people, as I mentioned earlier, who have done so much worse and have said so much worse than what Toby said to Molly Bloom. But people acted like he just walked into a crowded room and shot a bunch of people with a loaded gun. I mean, come on, guys. It really wasn't that big of a deal. Or even recently, I had a chance to meet Tom Welling at Philly Comic-Con, who's famous for playing Clark Kent in Smallville. He got in trouble in recent years for a DUI charge, but he owned up to it and he was willing to pay for what he did. And people still love him for playing Clark Kent. And that's really something that I think we have to keep in mind, even with all these famous people. You know, we're all sinners. We all have bad impulses. We all have bad tendencies. We're fickle. We're messy. We're complicated. We're all capable of doing great things, but we're also capable of doing really bad things and saying good and bad things too. Me as a believer, I have seen some people in certain groups that I've attended at the church that I've gone to for the last 10 years that have gone through hell and back when it felt like there was no hope for them. But then inevitably they found the strength to get back up and keep going. Won't go into too much detail, but unfortunately they weren't always without consequences. You know, none of us are perfect. There's only one person that's perfect, and that's Jesus Christ himself. He was the only one who was able to live a perfect life. And even on the other side, I would say he's still living out his perfection in eternity. But that's neither here nor there. If you're really gonna hold everybody to the same standard and expect perfection out of these people, you're going to find out real quick that it's not that simple. So I think we have to keep in mind that, you know, human nature is in every single one of these people as well. They're never going to really measure up truly to how we see them. They're not saints. They're not angels. Some are more good than others, and some are actually much worse than others. And then there's those who are somewhere in between. Nobody's ever really right or wrong.
We've all got both light and dark inside of us. What matters is the part we choose to act on.
Oh my god, I just remembered, since I brought that up, J.K. Rowling, the creative mind of the Harry Potter universe, being transphobic.
That's that bullshit. That's that bullshit right there.
Just horrible and deplorable things to say about a marginalized community that literally has no effect on anybody and that just wants to be accepted by greater society. And yet, you're contributing to a cause that wants to stamp them out of existence. And because of her ongoing stupidity, I've gotten some pushback over showing some excitement over the upcoming Harry Potter TV series, or still showing an affinity for the original movies or a respect for the books. Some people that I know personally refuse to even watch the movies again or read the books or see the upcoming show in light of all the stuff that's come out about J.K. Rowling. And I don't blame anyone for feeling that way. But even when you do that, you're really not making much of a dent on J.K. Rowling anyway.
Politics aside, attacking people for existing is unacceptable.
Yeah.
And that applies to both a casting decision and a certain author. So to me, I think about all of the hundreds of artists and people that are involved in this beyond one person. Like, when I was thinking about how covering Harry Potter would feel in 2026, and I am very aware that there are probably people angry right now that we're even talking about it, but I think of one hundreds of millionaire that will never notice the hundreds of people not watching. But then I think of the thousands of craftspeople and laborers and artists and actors who are never going to see the kind of money she's already making every 5 minutes that will be affected by people not watching. And to me, it's more important that the day-to-day person and the new actors and those people get a chance and for people to discover the magic of Harry Potter than someone that's already got more money than her grandkids will ever spend. Yeah. Like, we can do nothing to affect her infinite wealth.
Nor
and
the legacy of Harry Potter.
Right.
It's just going to keep growing. wrong.
And I get like the act of being rebellious, but if you're rebelling on Twitter, guess what? You're helping an asshole make money. If you're rebelling on YouTube, who owns YouTube? Google. One of the two founders is one of the co-founders of Tesla. Guess what? You're affecting that same asshole make money. Like, there's nothing we can do because of the society we live in for the top to be affected, but you are affecting the bottom. And so to me, I think about the artist, not the asshole.
Mm-hmm. So we both don't really care.
I mean, I do care, but at the same time, not enough to the point where I want to cancel the show. In my case, I mean, I'm saying this, I am not condoning everything that she said or did about the trans community or anything else disparaging that she might have said or done. Showing praise for somebody or something is not a wholesale endorsement of everything that that person said or did. If all we're doing is quoting people that we're in complete alignment with, we might as well be just quoting Jesus and the Blessed Mother. The irony of all that, even though J.K. Rowling has turned out to be an awful human being, there's not a single trace of her bigotry in her work on the Harry Potter series. It's actually the opposite of what now she's preaching against. And for some kind of saving grace, at least George Lucas never sunk to that kind of level. I don't see J.K. Rowling getting any kind of redemption. But I still believe that most people, if anything, are capable of getting a second chance, even if I'm aware that it's going to not sit well with some people. And even with me trying to offer some sort of second chance to somebody who did something just horrible or said something really bad. And it's probably the same reason I hesitated before I put on this Michael Vick jersey. No joke, before I started recording, I thought, do I really want to wear this jersey? And then I said, you know what? Fuck it. The guy paid his dues, he did his time, maybe it's on us to put our torches down. But again, I don't expect everybody to feel that way. And I know a few people who to this day refuse to give Michael Vick the time of day. My own sister, for example. Mom, I love you, and I love my sister too, for what it's worth. I'm not trying to be mean, I'm just trying to make a point. My sister will tell you, she refused to root for the Eagles for a long time because of that. Now she's managed to let that go with the Eagles anyway, but Michael Vick himself, not a chance. And she's a dog person, so that only adds more of a reason for her not to give him the time of day. And I guarantee you that if she saw me wearing this jersey right now, I know this is extreme, but she would literally cut my eyeballs out with a corkscrew. As far as my personal stance on Michael Vick, I'm getting flashbacks to that just thinking about it. And then when they announced he was coming back to play in Philly, I have to admit, I didn't really like it. In fact, I found it really hard to root for the Eagles for a little while because we had gotten our dog, our chocolate lab at the time. But then as he started to play, Michael Vick, and I saw what he was able to bring to us, and he made us a competitive team again, little by little, I was able to let it go. And if you were to watch the 60 Minutes interview he did at the time, he went into detail about what occurred in that dogfighting ring. I was wincing, and it made me sick to my stomach. But me wearing this jersey, I think it's safe to say that I was able to put it to rest for good. However, admittedly, I still have this visceral reaction in my head whenever I think about it of, what the hell possessed you to do that? But listening to him in the interview, taking accountability for what he did, I do applaud him for that, because he has made a conscious effort to own up to what he did, help out animal rights groups. He knows now that he did a bad thing, so I think maybe it's time for people to put their torches down, at least some people who are still holding a grudge. But I would be unbearably naive, as Ultron would say, to expect everybody else to let that go. And if you want to talk about athletes who are just a handful to deal with, take a look at Terrell Owens, for instance, and all the shenanigans that he caused when he was in Philly, when he realized that his contract wasn't what he thought it was. Doing sit-ups in his driveway, having his asshole agent Drew Rosenhaus going, next question, next question, next question. It was such a mess. My dad and I still to this day argue about who was right and who was wrong. My dad says they should have paid T.O. I respond with, T.O. should have changed his attitude. A hell of a player, but an ego the size of the Chrysler building. No, actually, I take that back. Maybe the size of the Burj Khalifa in Dubai. Not even Tom Cruise would be able to overthrow that ego. And that's another guy, Tom Cruise. Oh boy, you can imagine the reactions I've had from some people when I bring him up in conversation. No joke, one sergeant that I served under in the Army, she hates Tom Cruise.
with extreme prejudice.
I mean, I don't know much about the Scientology stuff. Maybe it's because I don't want to know anything about that. I've heard some pretty insane things, and I guess what you don't know will save your life, so we'll just leave it at that. But his love affair and marriage with Katie Holmes, or Kate Holmes, whatever, I was a little turned off by him at a certain point in time, but inevitably I was able to let that go, albeit I still think he's a little odd. But even so, he's been making entertainingly awesome movies for about 40 years. And he clearly has a passion for making the best kind of content for the audience that's going to watch his stuff. He has a way of drawing in a crowd, just like Mel Gibson does. Even though Mel Gibson's career hasn't properly recovered since the things that he said all that time ago, he can draw in an audience for people, and the studios know that someone like Tom Cruise or Mel Gibson, well, to a point anyway, with Mel Gibson, they are worth the hassle and controversy with all the dirt that they have on them in more ways than one. To a certain degree, they can use them to make money because studios really exist just to make money. But there are exceptions that they can make though, like Gina Carano. Oh, Gina Carano. She was saying certain things about the election and vaccines and masking, and even going as far as saying pretty horrible and ignorant things about the transgender community. And Gina Carano ended up saying being a conservative in Hollywood is like being a Jew in Nazi Germany. No, not true. If that were the case, Mark Wahlberg wouldn't still be getting jobs right now. Tim Allen still gets jobs. James Woods still gets jobs, maybe once in a while. Mel Gibson still gets work every now and then. James Arnold Taylor has said publicly that he's a Christian. He voices Obi-Wan in the Clone Wars, and yet people actually like him. And also because they're good at what they do. To some degree anyway. Gary Sinise, who's famous for playing Lieutenant Dan in Forrest Gump, and also in the TV show CSI New York. And he's also famous for Apollo 13. He's mostly dedicated his time to helping veterans who have served in Iraq and Afghanistan or Vietnam or whatever. None of those guys, as far as I know anyway, most of the time, are not going around saying crazy stuff that would cause a hassle for the studios to say, you know what, you're not worth the time. We don't need you on our project. And Tim Allen is still the voice of Buzz Lightyear, even after all this time. He has voiced support for Trump in the past, but he still is liked by the fans of the franchise. And I would imagine that he probably has some connections in the industry still that protect him, along with the other conservative actors that I've mentioned. Studios with those people don't really care nearly as much with those guys, except for maybe Gina Carano, who was given opportunities to change her tune. Even Pedro Pascal, he has a transgender sibling, so he's very protective and sensitive about that topic. He wanted to show her, hey, listen, if you say these things this way, people will leave you alone. And he tried to educate her about the transgender community. But no, she said what she said, which inevitably got her fired, so she basically did it to herself. With Gina Carano, it gets to a point where the studio says, you know, why should we have that headache? And to be honest with you, I wasn't a huge fan of the Cara Dune character. Not that I disliked her, but I wasn't too hyped up about her inclusion in the show anyway. And Gina Carano I don't think is that good of an actress anyway, so I wasn't really upset when she left. Even if those guys have a certain worldview that I don't fully align with, I don't hate him for that reason. I don't like all of Mark Wahlberg's movies, but I think he's one of the best actors in the business. Tim Allen brings a lot of nostalgia for me with the Toy Story movies and the Santa Claus and the Home Improvement show, which I did watch a little bit of when I was a kid. The list goes on, really. I know everybody's going to feel differently in their own way, but that's where I stand anyway. I've also seen the opposite of that happen. I've known some people who refuse to watch Chris Evans' movies ever again because of how liberal he is or how much he doesn't like Trump. People have said the same thing about Pedro Pascal, and he has toned it down a little bit in the last few years since his career has really taken off with The Last of Us and The Mandalorian, and now he's going to be in the MCU going forward as Reed Richards. He has said some stuff about the Israel-Palestine conflict in recent years, but he's not as vocal about it as he used to be as far as maybe 10 years ago. Even people who are progressive are not immune from being canceled. And you know, even with what I was saying earlier with Harry Potter, Daniel Radcliffe, I've heard, is an atheist. And I'm a believer in a higher power. And I may not really sit well with that because personally atheism has never felt right to me. That's a different discussion. And I felt a similar way when I saw Elizabeth Olsen say that she doesn't believe in a god or an afterlife or whatever when she did the movie Eternity recently. As much as that pains me to hear people say that they're atheists or whatever, I have to recognize that, you know, it's their own path, it's their life. Just let them live their lives the way they want to. Because I really still do like the work that I've seen them do, even if I don't align with their views 100%. When you strip all those labels away and you get rid of all the baggage from what people say or do,
while we may come from different places and speak in different tongues, our hearts beat as one.
There are certain people that I will never give a pass to. A certain political movement that's running our country right now. I've made it pretty clear how I felt about them, but going forward I'm not going to be talking about that nearly as much because I realize that it's probably not the right place to talk about that stuff. But those guys, white supremacists and Nazis, the Taliban, there are absolutes in the world. You can't always go, perspective. No. Those people, you can't make an exception for that. And I don't blame people for feeling a certain way about somebody because of their past experience. Going back to Michael Jackson for a little bit. When the movie came out a couple months ago, it not only reinvigorated my love of his musical work, it made me interested in what he was like as a person. And so I did some research into his life because the movie actually did kind of educate me on just really how hard and complicated his life actually was. I do remember the trial that he was on in 2005, and seeing what he was accused of admittedly was really hard to swallow because I thought, did he do it? Did he not do it? There are some people that I've seen in comment sections on Reddit, which...
Reddit.com, where everything is super...
Very accurate information, just second to UrbanDictionary.com.
There are some people who think that Michael Jackson's music should never be played on the radio or revered or listened to ever again.
Good luck.
Even with all of the allegations and controversy, people to this day still love his music. And even the Michael Jackson movie, my thoughts on it aside, it's proven to be financially successful, and it's introduced a new generation to his music that probably never would have listened to it otherwise. His impact cannot be denied. I did a little research into both sets of allegations from 1993 and the 2005 trial, and I realized pretty quickly that, okay, there's layers to this. It's not as cut and dry as some people would have you believe. And similar thing can be said for Dave Grohl. When one of you guys sent me an article about what happened to him having the affair that he had, it's not as cut and dry. There's some nuances going on here, and there's a lot of things that played into the snowball effect of where he ended up. I'll get back to Michael Jackson in a minute, but the fact that he came out also, Dave Grohl, I think was very commendable. He more or less had to do that before it got out the wrong way, and I'm not naive to think otherwise. Chances are his manager or agent said to him, you gotta get this out before it comes out the hard way. Props to him for getting that out and owning up to his shortcomings, which led him to where he is right now. Which is a lot more than I can say for a certain person in the Oval Office right now, who has done far, far worse than what Dave Grohl has done. But still.
It's kind of fucked up you did that.
But back to Michael Jackson. Now, this is my own observation, my own conclusion. Take from this what you will. Hate me all you want for it. I don't think he was an actual pedophile. That being said, there's a few things in those scenarios that make me go, I don't know about that. That's a red flag. Now, I've known women who have experienced sexual abuse of some kind. They've been victimized by it. Even some women that I've dated in the past. So I'm all for people getting justice for what happened to them, including the guys. I mean, I don't know exactly what the statistics are on how many men have been victimized by that stuff as in comparison to women, but they do exist. So yeah, I'm all for justice in those scenarios. In the case of Michael Jackson, however, I'm sorry, but I gotta question the motives of the accusers here. Because if all you're gonna do is demand money the first time around, why not put him on trial?
I don't think there's a price on justice for my child.
No.
Right.
And how does that help the other children? How does that help the other children if it's happening?
It hurts the real victims. When you take money from a settlement, you hurt the real victims because then it gives the defense of saying, well, they were just after the money.
I like to think that if it was my child, and if I knew that I knew that I knew that I knew that I knew, I don't care who the person is, I'm going to put him in front of a judge, in front of 12 members of the jury, and prove that they actually did something. And the guy's been dead for 17 years. Why is the Finding Neverland documentary coming out right now? And even all that other stuff about the quote-unquote second family, why is that coming out right now? Now, one of the counters I've heard is that it's time for that stuff to come to the light and they realize as a father that they know what's most important. Okay, perhaps. But even so, there's so much conflicting information going on in here that I'm not exactly quick to believe that he actually did something.
Then you still have people like Macaulay Culkin who said he never did anything. You had, what's the other one's name? Corey Friedman. Michael Jackson does have 3 children. None of those children have said anything about their dad. And I'm kind of thinking, they lived in that house with him. Their story has never changed about their dad. So think about that.
And there is apparently a picture of him in the Epstein files, which on that note, being mentioned in the files does not mean you did anything wrong. But there's also some theories that he was actually secretly getting the kids away from Epstein Island. there's no evidence to prove that he was doing that either. To my knowledge anyway, there's nothing conclusive either way that he was doing something wrong or doing something right. And apparently Anne Hathaway is mentioned in those files. Once. There's no evidence proving that she did anything wrong or had some sort of guilty knowledge of what was happening. But of course, for the average person who doesn't know how to distinguish those things, it doesn't take too much for them to look at that and say, oh, I knew it. I knew they were doing something wrong. I knew there was something weird about them.
Context.
I've had some people say to me who are Trump supporters that every single person that's mentioned in the files is a progressive, a liberal, or a Democrat. And they were so convinced that the Epstein files were going to be the ultimate killing blow for the left and the Democratic Party. I am not exaggerating. I am not being hysterical. Anytime that came up, they said that right to my face. They've also told me that every single actor that I like is in those files. I challenge anyone to tell me people like Tobey Maguire, Christian Bale, Kiefer Sutherland, Eddie Vedder, Chester Bennington, Natalie Portman, Robert Downey Jr., Chris Evans are all in the Epstein files. Is Steven Spielberg in the files? Is Tom Hanks in there? Is Avril Lavigne in the files? Is Billie Eilish in there too? Is Taylor Swift in the files somehow? Is Freddie Mercury in there if he somehow miraculously survived? Which is something that I would not put past you believing if someone like Jesse Waters or Alex Jones would have told you. Or even maybe somebody like Benny Johnson. No disrespect to anybody who listens to those people. I could go on and on with the names, but you see how ridiculous that all sounds? By the way, even if those people are mentioned in the files, then find out what exactly the context was. And it turns out that they did do something or had some sort of guilty knowledge, then punish them according to the rule of law, and shame on them for their part in it. But as it turns out, that's not really true. To my knowledge, there is zero, and I mean absolutely zero evidence to suggest that they were in cahoots with Jeffrey Epstein. And even with Michael Jackson, I've had some conversations after the movie came out where people were just horrified over the fact that I saw the movie because of what he was accused of, and then they actually believed the victims. Again, I understand why, but you know what? I'm not even going to go there. You know what? I'm totally going to go there. Let's do it.
Don't do it!
No, it's bullshit. Michael Jackson's accused of being a pedophile, isn't found guilty in a court despite multiple investigations, and some people still call for his head. Donald Trump brags on tape about what he likes to do to women, is found liable for that, is apparently all up in the Epstein files, and people give him flowers and candy, or they just shrug it off, calling him the equivalent of Jesus Christ. If you think I'm making that last part up, I'm not.
And Mr. President, no one has paid the price like you have paid the price. It almost cost you your life. You were betrayed and arrested and falsely accused. It's a familiar pattern that our Lord and Savior showed us.
Blasphemer!
As soon as those words left her lips, it made me want to throw up. And that's it. That's in the past, done. End rant. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that, don't get on your soapbox or get on some sort of moral superiority train. If people like Mel Gibson, just let people like his movies or like him as a person. Same thing goes for Michael Jackson. Let people listen to his music. Don't shame them for liking him. Or people like Tobey Maguire, or Dave Grohl, or Mark Wahlberg, or Chris Evans, or anybody really, or even if they like Michael Vick as a football player. I mean, if you want to question why they like them, then okay, yeah, you have every right to do that. But instead of just coming off in a dismissive tone, just ask them, why do you like that person? Like, do you like their music? Do you like their movies, their shows? Even if they said or did all of this, or even if they vote a certain way or believe in whatever. And another one just came to mind. Neil Druckmann, the creator of The Last of Us. He is someone that I have respected and admired for a long time, even if some of his views on Israel I think are problematic, somewhat controversial with certain people that I know have a certain view of the Israel-Palestine situation. But I think the guy's a creative genius, and I really like hearing his insight and what goes on in his head during the creative process. And I still follow the guy on Instagram, so that should tell you everything you need to know. Oh, and another one, Ben Affleck. Solid actor and a great director, but as a person, cheated on his now ex-wife Jennifer Garner with a housemaid. Yeah. Now, I'm sure there's definitely layers to that situation, but for time purposes, I'm not going to go into that here. Along with what I said, just letting people like who they like. Humanity is very complex. Human nature is a lot more intricate than we often think it is. There are exceptions, yes, but most of the time, no. If anyone doesn't like what I had to say, you obviously have the right to feel that way if you do. But if you're willing to share some of your thoughts on this topic, on where do you draw the line and when do you think it's okay to do so, civilly please let me know down in the comments below what your thoughts are on it, because I am admittedly curious as to what you guys will say. I don't expect 100% alignment on this. If you disagree with me, just let me know politely. Let's try to have a civil discussion because, you know, there is a tendency, I think, to throw the baby out with the bathwater when somebody says or does something stupid. And I want to try to be at least one person out there who says, no, don't do that, because everything I said about humanity being so complex. Let's try to at least be a better example and show that not everybody is willing to throw somebody under the bus. And I also think it's a good thing for humanity to show that they have standards and they're not willing to tolerate certain types of behavior that are not acceptable or just completely deplorable. Even so, there is still a tendency to go too far in that direction. I don't know if I'm making any sense, and maybe I'm being too idealistic or naive, but that's just really how I feel. And I appreciate you guys listening in, if you've listened to the whole thing all the way through and bearing with me as I've gone on somewhat of a tirade. But thank you all once again for tuning in. Just let me know what your thoughts are down below on this topic if you'd like to. Stay tuned for more videos coming in. Hit like and subscribe if you'd like to see more from me. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next one.